both my doula and the midwife had mentioned they thought that the baby was kind of crooked,
Mhm.
like not quite where he needed to be, and that's probably why things were taking so long. But I guess in doing those lunges in and out of the tub, he aligned himself in just the right way, and as soon as I got out of the tub and walked over to this, like, nest that was made with, like, shower curtains and towels, I lean onto my yoga ball, so I'm kind of, like, on all fours, and he starts coming out, like, very, very fast. I'm not pushing. I didn't really want to push, and so I feel him starting to come out, and his head is, like, coming out, and I am just, like, speaking to the room just in case they didn't know what was going on, that I'm pretty sure this is the ring of fire, but it's not that bad. I'm fine. As he's literally coming out of me, and the midwife was just like, "Yeah, he's coming out of you."
Hey, you're listening to Empowered Births at Home with me, Esmeralda, the home birth doula, as your host. I am a mama of three, fellow home birther, and entrepreneur. I am completely obsessed with birth, more specifically, home birth. And this is a podcast where women share their empowering home birth stories, along with the journey that led them down the path to home birth. Whether you're currently pregnant, planning a home birth with your first or fourth baby, or even just someone who is a complete birth nerd like me, this is the podcast for you. So let's get into this week's empowering home birth story. We are on episode 26 today. We will be chatting with Heidi about her home birth with her second baby. So let's go ahead and bring Heidi on.
Hi, I'm Heidi, and I am a stay-at-home mom to 2 little boys. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I am also a military spouse, which if anyone has any questions about military spouse and home birth, I'm happy to talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's about me. I just stay home with my boys, and it's the best thing. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there would be some women who have questions about if they're living maybe on base, like, can I have a home
Yep,
birth, things like that.
that's exactly
So,
what I did.
yeah, definitely. If anyone's listening and is in like that situation, definitely that'd be cool if they could reach out to you. So, we'll share all of that at the end if anyone is interested in that. So, what kind of got you into the whole home birth world?
So I knew from my very first pregnancy that I wanted to have a natural birth. And so after my first birth didn't go the way I wanted, I started researching more about other options. So with my first, I planned to go to a birth center with midwives. And this was during 2020,
Mm.
which gives a little context to just the situation around my pregnancy,
Yeah.
but my care was great. I did really enjoy having the personal care from midwives, and when I was 36 weeks pregnant, it was their policy to just confirm that, like, baby was head down so that I think the state laws were that's what made it so they could do an out of hospital birth,
Hmm.
but my baby was breech.
Mm.
Like, everything else about him was healthy, everything about me was healthy, but he was breech, and all of a sudden, my plans to have this, like, undisturbed birth at a birth center were kind of, like, shaken up. They gave me 2 options. They said I could go today to the hospital to do an ECV where they try to flip the baby, or I could schedule my C-section for the next week. So I went to the hospital that day with my husband, and I think it ends up being the next day that the OB attempts to flip my baby, and it's unsuccessful, but I'm still pretty adamant about that I wanna, like, give him time to flip because sometimes babies flip all the way up until labor, so I say, "Okay, well, we can schedule a C-section for 40 weeks, and, like, hopefully he flips by then or during labor," but I end up going into labor the next week at 37 weeks on my own.
Okay.
And so when I go into labor, I call everyone, we all meet at the hospital, and I'm having my C-section, and the midwife, I think it's when they're closing me up, she's like, "Oh, you would be a great candidate for a VBAC. You're gonna have a
Mhm.
great VBAC next time." Like,
Mhm.
while I'm on the operating table, she says that, and that was the first time I had heard of that term. I'd never met anyone who had had anything other than repeat cesareans.
Yeah.
So I took that and, like, started researching because I'd researched a lot prior to that about the birth I wanted, but
Mhm.
not too much about these other scenarios. And in South Carolina, I don't know if the laws have changed, but I believe they can a midwife can only attend a breech birth in a birth center or a hospital,
Mhm.
and a certified midwife cannot attend a home birth with a VBAC. But when my son was 8 months old, we moved to Washington State, where the
Okay.
laws are actually reversed. A
Mhm.
midwife cannot attend a birth center VBAC, but they can attend a home birth VBAC.
Mm.
So when we moved to our new area and I started researching, like, what are the new laws here, because I knew we wanted to have another baby, that was something I, like, was like, "Oh, well, then I don't wanna go to a hospital." I didn't wanna go to a hospital with my first anyway, so I guess my option is go to a home birth, and I just
Mhm.
full send was like, "Okay, that's what we're doing with that." I, at that point, had only met, one other person who'd had a home birth or any birth outside of the medical system, and so I leaned really heavily on her for that
Mhm.
information, but that was when I decided we'd be having a home birth, is when I kinda got told my two options. I had
Mhm.
nothing in between this time. So, when when we did start trying to conceive again, I found out I was pregnant on my oldest son's 2nd birthday,
Okay.
and from day 1 of that pregnancy journey, I was like, "Okay, well, it's time to find a home birth midwife and start interviewing home birth doulas and go forward with that."
Did you have any kind of, like, second thoughts about it? Because it sounds like it wasn't something that really was like, "Oh, I want to have a home birth, like, so bad, like, that's what I need to do." It was more kind of like you saw your options and that seemed like the better option. So did you have any thoughts in your head of, like, "Maybe this isn't right for me?"
This might be almost like a selfish thought, but I really didn't want to deal with cleaning up, which I know the midwives or doulas, like, clean up, but the idea of, like, having my home ready and having
Mhm.
all the cleanup in my house afterwards and some of the extra costs that go with a home birth that
Yeah.
insurance don't cover was kind of the only reasons I didn't think home birth was, like, my number one choice. I was like, a birth center would be really nice because I did want that, like, hands-off experience, even if so a hospital was, like, never something I was considering,
Mhm.
but a home birth was the only second thoughts I was having was some of those, like, little details or, like, more
Mhm.
like just minor inconveniences to me, which they
Yeah.
ended up not being at all. Um, and now I would never go back to having any other type of birth experience, but I never had any doubts about, like, second thoughts of, "Oh, should I go to a hospital?"
Mhm.
I
Okay.
actually, when I was talking with the midwives I was interviewing and the doulas I was interviewing, I immediately was asking, like, "What would disqualify me from your care? Like, if I
Mhm.
had another breech baby, would that disqualify me?" And when they were, like, talking about what things would, I was like, "Okay, so my options are everything on your checklist or stay at home by myself." Like,
Mhm.
not even, the hospital would be my go-to.
Yeah. And that's definitely a great question. Is that something that you had talked with your midwives about for your first birth, or you didn't even think about asking those questions the
No,
first
I
time?
didn't think about those questions at all. I was 20. I was, had a healthy baby. Everything
Mhm.
was going fine. And so I didn't even think of anything that could go wrong
Mhm.
or even realize that they had legal obligations and insurance liabilities. I know that there are a lot of good midwives out there, but I did not realize how much bureaucracy
Mhm.
some midwives can impose on themselves, and I gave them 100% of my trust thinking that, the midwives would always be serving me first and foremost,
Yeah.
and in my experience, that is just not true, and so
Mhm.
it was the first thing I asked everyone that I was inviting into my birth space was, "What liabilities are you concerned about? What
Yeah.
legalities are going to bar you from supporting me?"
Yeah, those are really great questions. I always advise everyone to have like an extensive list of when they are interviewing midwives, interviewing doulas, because it seems like something that's very, oh, I don't need to ask that many questions. If we're
Yeah.
on the same page, like it'll be good. And it's kind of like, yeah, but also you want to make sure that you're fully on the same page about everything and you know
Yeah.
that sometimes, like, if this happens or that happens, you might risk out of their care. And if you don't know that from the beginning, then things will take a turn at the very end. And
Yes.
that's not something you're prepared for. So, yeah,
Even if
definitely.
you choose even if after you risked out of their care, you chose to go with a hospital route, I feel like people still just assume they'll go with the flow of what those midwives choose, and you might not like the OB that they work with.
Hmm.
You might have a different preference, and if you kind of ask those questions ahead of time, you can prepare yourself better. That's something I wish I'd done with my first pregnancy, and I took a lot of initiative in my second to do.
Yeah, that's definitely great advice for anyone who is planning a home birth currently.
Yes. Make sure everyone, the doulas, the midwives, the birth photographer is on the same page with you about the birth you want to have and supporting you.
Hmm. Yeah. And so going into your home birth, was there anything else that you did differently, like preparation wise or anything like that?
Yes and no. So the second time I had so many more options because it wasn't COVID. I did prenatal yoga, which I think really gave me a lot of the stamina that I needed for my long birth. That was spectacular. Like, if I had to do any one thing again, I would like any prenatal preparation,
Hmm.
prenatal yoga. Like, with my first, I had done, chiropractic care,
Okay.
and he with a Webster certified chiropractor, and I didn't do that this time, so that was a big difference, and I felt better and didn't need it this second time.
Okay.
I also I took the same herbs the second time as I was planning for the same, like, natural birth with both of them.
Hmm.
I had a pretty different diet when I was preparing because I knew that I needed, like, more nourishment than I had previously,
Hmm.
and I think that was another thing that helped me stay so, like, full and nourished, like, during my pregnancy and going into my labor and my postpartum. So that was
Yeah.
those those things on their own, I think, like, set me up for a lot more success. I also read some different books. I read Hannah Baker's Birth on Your Own Terms
Hmm.
and Bringing Birth Home, which is a collection of birth stories instead of just your standard, like, what to expect books, to really put myself in the mental state of I can do this home birth. I wasn't looking for any external validation
Hmm.
that, like, I could do it and I didn't need, like, a midwife's approval for it to happen, if that makes sense, and I think reading
Yeah.
those 2 books definitely helped instill that. I also listened to birth stories the second
Hmm.
time. The first time I didn't listen to any any
Hmm.
birth stories, I was just like, "It'll be fine. It'll
Hmm.
be great. I'm sure I know what to do, and if I don't, the midwives will."
Yeah.
So I listened to a lot of I think, the Happy Home Birth podcast, and
Hmm.
your podcast wasn't out yet,
No.
and the Free Birth Society, and those just
Okay.
lots of, like, empowering birth stories
Hmm.
to surround myself with. I don't think I did anything else to prepare. Like, I was
Hmm.
like, mentally, check, nourished, hydrated, stretched." My body can do the rest.
Yeah, those are really good pillars to go off of. So, yeah, that's amazing. And then if you want to go ahead and go into when labor started, or if you like had super early labor, anything like that, you could just go right into that.
Okay. I'll talk a little bit about the very end of my pregnancy because I'm someone who starts having Braxton Hicks, almost prodromal type labor
Mhm.
about 2 months before with both my pregnancies.
Okay.
And so that last 2 months where I'm like getting these practice contractions were really important to me mentally that I was like, oh, okay, I'm feeling these and I'm like handling them and I'm living my life through them.
Mhm.
And part of that for me was surrounding myself with positive people. I had a baby shower towards that last bit. And at that baby shower, I had all of my friends and my husband make affirmation cards for me. They all knew that I was planning this birth. They're like all my neighbors, and they were just so positive and supportive. And so I remember having some of those contractions during the baby shower and being like,
Mhm.
"Wow, I'm being surrounded by them now, and I'm my friends, and I'm gonna take these cards with me into my birth space and
Mhm.
just feel their love." And that was like almost a practice to it, like the mental part of labor. And then fast forward to my actual birth, after having all those practice contractions, I am the morning before I have him so achy. I'm definitely in early labor, but, like, not mentally ready to accept that yet,
Yeah.
and my husband finally had some time off work, and we had one last thing on our due before baby comes checklist, and for me, that was to go see the Barbie movie. When it when it came out, it was, like, so close to my due date
Mhm.
that I was I was worried I wouldn't be able to see it. I'd be like, "Oh, once I have this baby, I'm not gonna leave the house until it's out of theaters," and we had all these other things we had done, and finally we're like, "Okay, it's time to go see the Barbie movie," I guess since I was 39 weeks at this point,
Okay.
which I had my first at 37, so I was kind of getting a little impatient.
Mhm.
I'd never been this pregnant before, and so I was, "Okay, 39 weeks. Let's go do this." So the entire movie, I am, 100% in labor. I'm the type of person who has really achy contractions versus strong surges.
Mhm.
And so I'm just achy and I don't feel good. And then at some point, my husband's like, if you give birth in this theater, we have to name the baby Ken. And I'm like, okay, no, let's go home. So as soon as the movie's done, we go back home and everything kind of slows down. I almost think being in the dark theater, my brain was like, oh, it's nighttime. Like, let's get some more hormones flowing and labor
Yeah.
going. So we get home, we have our afternoon with our toddler, and we put him to bed, and I'm feeling completely fine, and then I start having more of these terrible achy feelings again, just feeling so sore in my back. My husband put our toddler to sleep, and I didn't know tonight was gonna be the last night, but I was like, "Oh, well, I'll go kiss him. I'll go say goodnight," because it
Mhm.
had been my husband's job the last couple weeks, and so he's all asleep, and we go to relax for our evening, and every day this week, I've been having the same more intense practice contractions, and to try to distract us from that, we went through the Mission Impossible movies. Like, one every night, and by the time it was over, I'd be so, like, exhausted, and it would be time for bed. So we're watching the last Mission Impossible movie, and we're, like, 20
Mhm.
minutes in, and I cannot concentrate on it. And my husband's like, "Are you even watching this right now?" Like, "No. No, I'm not." And I'm bouncing on the yoga ball and just getting very instinctual with, like, my movements. Like, it's still early labor, but I'm like, "This is what I need to feel, like, some relief. This is what feels natural." And I go to use the restroom, and he stops the movie, and I find the first parts of my mucus plug. I'm like, "Okay, I think tonight might actually be the night." So I text my doula, and I let her know hey, this isn't the same as every other night this week. We're actually getting into more productive labor,
Yeah.
and it's getting close to like 11 p.m. My doula has a family of her own, so she's like, well, let me know if you can't sleep. Like, try to go to sleep. It definitely sounds like Labor Day. Get some rest. So I try to sleep, and the minute I lay down, I am in excruciating pain. Like so I get back up and I'm like, okay, let's take a shower. I try
Mhm.
for another hour or two to see if this will calm down and give me a restful night and then get going. But when that doesn't happen, I'm like, hey, it's probably time for you to come over. I had a birth photographer. I text her that she might want to come over. And I think we call the midwife too and let her know kind of where contractions were at. I wasn't timing anything, but
Mhm.
my husband was. And then the midwife says that, oh, yeah, she'll come over too. And so when she comes over, she is not, she like checks in with me and is like, okay, well, I think this is like very early labor. And
Mm.
so she goes back home, but my doula and the photographer stay, and the surges of that are like this achy feeling just stays that way for like hours and hours.
Mm.
And the midwife comes back at some point. I am like fully concentrating on this sensation. I'm not really aware of when people are coming in and out, but my husband and doula are giving me counter pressure, which at some point starts annoying me. I'm like, this isn't really helping. Like, I wasn't quite feeling it there. I wasn't feeling pressure. I tried using a TENS unit,
Okay.
which also I was like, I'm not a huge fan of this. I gave it a go. And then my doula brings out a birth comb. And as soon as she gives it to me, I'm pretty sure I held on to it for the next 12 hours that I carried with me everywhere. And once I had that, I spent a lot of time going into the shower and just like kind of closing everyone out and staying in there for some time and then getting back out and then getting back in. And I just kept that up for quite a while. And I wasn't trying to put a timeline to any of this, but once the sun started to rise, I was like, okay, this has been enough time and everyone's still here. I knew early labor could, in theory, go on for a very long time. And I'd never had this experience before. So, like, maybe I'm being like overly sensitive to this and everyone should like go home and rest. So, at
Mhm.
that point, is the first time in my pregnancy that I actually asked for a cervical check to be done. And I'm at 7 centimeters, is I think what the midwife said. So, like, definitely not, you know, early labor anymore.
Mhm.
But when she does a cervical check, I think she assumes that I'm getting like impatient or like maybe she's tired. And she asks me if I want my water to be broken.
Mm.
And I tell her no.
Mhm.
I'm like, no, no, thank you. I'm still very much in this space of feeling these sensations and not having like much awareness of much else going on outside of me.
Mhm.
And but I do remember telling her like no thank you. And within the hour of her asking me that, my water breaks on its own
Mm.
and things start to move very fast after that. My waters break and I start having some blood, like more bright red blood.
Mhm.
And she makes her way into my space again and asks, she says, I think you have a cervical lip.
Mm.
Would you like me to move it? I'm like, no, thank you. I think I'm doing fine on my own. I remember hearing my doula be like, nope, she doesn't want any of that right now. And then the midwife like backs off in my face again. And I'm still in my own space and I'm not leaning on too many people at this point, but I do feel I think myself almost go into transition. Like I knew it was almost time and I knew I didn't need any other help. But with all the blood I asked my husband if he would help take the shower and rinse me off,
Mhm.
and everyone is getting really antsy, like, I think they thought I was about to push the baby out, and this is only another within the hour of since my water broke.
Okay.
So, the midwife tells my husband to start filling the bath up and says, "Oh, she's gonna give birth in the bath," which I adamantly wanted a land birth. I didn't have a birth tub, I knew where I wanted to give birth, and she starts telling him, like, "It's time to fill it up," and he's like, "No, she just wants to be rinsed off. She knows what's going on," and that was, like, the most attractive thing. It was so amazing hearing him, like, take assertiveness and trust in me and my body during
Mhm.
this birth. It was so great. So he helps rinse me off, and I'm kind of lunging in the bathtub,
Mhm.
which earlier both my doula and the midwife had mentioned they thought that the baby was kind of, crooked,
Mhm.
like, not quite where he needed to be, and that's probably why things were taking so long. But I guess in doing those lunges in and out of the tub, he aligned himself in just the right way, and as soon as I got out of the tub and walked over to this, like, nest that was made with, like, shower curtains and towels, I lean onto my yoga ball, so I'm kind of, like, on all fours, and he starts coming out, like, very, very fast. I'm not pushing. I didn't really want to push, and so I feel him starting to come out, and his head is, like, coming out, and I am just, like, speaking to the room just in case they didn't know what was going on, that I'm pretty sure this is the ring of fire, but it's not that bad. I'm fine. As he's literally coming out of me, and the midwife is just like, "Yeah, he's coming out of you." So, with no pushing or anything, his head comes out, and my husband is standing, like, behind me and is ready to catch our baby, and there's one more, like, sensation, and he comes all the way out. He's this tiny little 6 pound, 3 ounces, at least the
Mhm.
tiniest little baby, and he's born so fast.
Uh-huh.
And once he is born, instead of me being on all fours, I lay back into my doula's arms, and she just, like, supports me fully as I'm laying on the ground, and my husband's holding the baby and puts him on my chest, and he is just the calmest. He's not crying, but his, like, eyes are open, and he's looking at us, and he is just so peaceful, like, the whole room is just quiet, and I except for me, I'm crying. I'm crying that, "Oh my gosh, I did it." And then within, like, 10 minutes, my placenta comes out. I remember that was my least that feeling of my placenta coming out and my waters breaking were my least favorite sensations of the whole birth. And so it comes out, and we just are laying on the floor for a bit, and they put my placenta in a bowl, and we move up to the bed, and we just get to relax all together for an hour, um, before the midwife says that I was still bleeding, like, quite a bit, um, and she's like, "I think you might have a tear," and so she wanted to assess that, and so she checks, and I have a second-degree tear
Mhm.
because he came out very quickly.
Yeah.
And she just suggests some stitches, and then for us to eat a meal, for me to take a shower, and then at this point it is 1 PM and everybody just goes home and I get to stay in my house
Mhm.
and just start, like, living my life with my new baby.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. That is amazing. I love how you really took charge of like your whole birth. You can really tell from just like the different words that you use and also how you were able to kind of just like advocate for yourself in times where you knew exactly what you wanted and what you didn't want. and being able to just like stay in charge of that. And then also when you
Yeah.
said your husband like came and did the same thing too, that's just so amazing.
It was definitely what I needed. I felt like I gave all my power away in my first birth, like, I wasn't taking accountability,
Mhm.
and so it had crossed my mind to maybe birth, like, out of the system completely,
Mhm.
but I almost felt like I needed to stand up for myself in it,
Mhm.
and I think that's, like, it was the most empowering experience of my life, like,
Mhm.
completely,
Yeah.
to just take that back, and it healed all of the wounds I had from my first pregnancy and birth.
Mhm. That's amazing. I think that's something that's very common in our society today is like leaving all of the responsibility to the provider, especially in like the hospital setting, is like the OB is going to take charge and has full responsibility over everything that's happening. And it's kind of like the norm now of how
Yeah,
everyone does it. But really, it should be us that takes responsibility for everything and, like, takes charge. It's our body, it's our birth, it's our baby. We should be the one deciding whether something should happen or something shouldn't happen, and not putting it all into someone else's hands. So
yeah.
that's really amazing.
Oh, it was such a great experience. I can't wait to do it again. I wanna the other thing that was probably postpartum, like, going into it was my for months now, my sister had been planning to come visit that weekend.
Mhm.
That was the only time that they and their partner could come see me. I wasn't sure if I was gonna have the baby, and so they were driving up, and I didn't tell them that I had gone into labor, and so when they
Yeah.
showed up, they just came up and were like, "There's, like, a whole baby here now." That was, like, so surprising. I feel like that's something you can't well, you could do with a hospital, but the fact they were able to just, like, come to my house and I had just had a baby
Mhm.
was super
Yeah,
exciting.
definitely. And so, because you mentioned it at the beginning, how was the cleanup afterwards?
I didn't see any of it happen. While I was in the shower, my birth team put all of the towels into the washing machine and started it, and the shower curtains got thrown away. So my placenta, I decided not to keep. I would have loved to plant it with a tree, but we're a military family, and so I
Mhm.
wasn't gonna carry around a placenta for a bunch of years until I had a place to put it.
Yeah.
So the midwives took that with them. My bed was completely clean because I didn't touch it during labor. I think my husband, while I was in the shower, also took off the extra shower curtain we'd had on the bed,
Mhm.
and everything else was clean. I had some blood in the bathroom. They got everything cleaned up, and I didn't have to worry about it. It was a lot less messy than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. And that's definitely why I wanted to touch on it and just see like how your experience was because normally that is the case where like the birth team will take care of everything and it doesn't even look like
Yeah.
a birth really happened. It
Yeah.
the only evidence of a birth is like the baby being there really.
Yeah, definitely. It and we spent all the time, like, in my room, so I probably didn't need to worry as much about the couch being deep cleaned for people to come
Mm.
over.
Yeah, there's a lot of little, like, tiny things that we think needs to be done, but really it doesn't.
No.
But I think that just comes with pregnancy too. Like, we're kind of like, we need to clean all of the walls in the house before the baby's here and deep scrub the floors and
Oh, yeah,
just
the
like
baby's
all
gonna
this stuff.
clear. Yep.
The baby's not crawling yet, but we need to clean up everything.
With my first, I was scrubbing the outside of the house. It was I was like, "This door is just so dirty outside. We have to clean it before he comes or he's gonna, I don't know, hate us?" I
He's gonna judge me.
Yeah.
It's relatable, but yeah, definitely something that not a lot of people should worry about is the cleanup after birth, unless you are planning like a free birth with just you and your partner.
Yeah.
Then maybe like the cleanup
I
would be
think
a
your
little bit
husband's got it.
more,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, especially like with midwives and a birth team and having people there, they usually just take care of everything. And it's like Little fairies just working and cleaning really
Yep.
fast and you don't even notice.
Someone I definitely know it was the birth team that did all the cleaning because my husband was cooking me eggs and bacon.
Mm.
And I came out of my shower, the house is clean, my food is warm, my baby's here.
Mhm. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing. If anyone wants to connect with you, especially if they are a military family and they have questions, where can they
Yeah.
find you?
I am on Instagram. It is outside.mama, and that's the only social media I'm on right now.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and link that down below so anyone who wants to reach out can through there. And do you have any last thoughts or final things you want to say?
No, I don't think so. That was just the best birth experience ever, and I can't wait to hopefully do something that great again.
Yeah.
Thank you for having
Amazing.
me.
Yeah, thank you for being on. It was a pleasure. What an amazing home birth story we just heard from Heidi. How magical and beautiful and special that was. I cannot get enough of these. They are absolutely my favorite part of what I do, besides attending births, obviously. But hearing birth stories is something that I just hold so close to my heart. Being able to provide this space for women to come and share their home birth stories with us is something that is such an honor that I get to be able to do. So, thank you to each of you who come on to the podcast to share your story, and to those of you who come on each week to listen to the birth stories. Don't forget that if you are planning a home birth right now, I do offer a free home birth starter bundle that you can go ahead and download. The link will always be down below in the show notes if you are interested in that. So definitely make sure you go ahead and check that out and grab yourself the starter bundle. If you are currently planning and preparing for a home birth, then I'd love to share with you more information about the Empowered Home Birth course. This is a home birth based birth course, and inside this 8-week program, you will receive educational videos and weekly emails filled with additional resources for you to prepare for your empowering home birth. Once you purchase the course, you also get perks such as access to my entire resource library and private community chats. To enroll, click the link in the show notes and get started on the journey to your empowered home birth. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share with any family or friends who may benefit from these empowering stories. Also, don't forget to leave a 5-star rating and review to help others who are searching for this information find this podcast. I'll see you next week for another empowering home birth story.